there, friends and sane persons, and welcome to another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. My name is Kyle, and Wednesday Whimsy is a short show that I do every Wednesday evening where I talk about a board game, a top 10 list, or some other board game related topic, whatever happens to be on my mind at the time. Well, I mentioned this last week when I talked about Wraith and the Giants, but I wanted to do a top 10 list of my top 10 boss battler games. So this is it's not a new genre, but it's one that all of a sudden there were not really very many boss battler games, and then all of a sudden there were a whole bunch. A boss battler game is really different from a dungeon crawl because in this game it's really focused on fighting against a boss, right? You kind of skip the whole dungeon. There's a bunch of different ways that it might work, but normally there's a big bad and you're taking some sort of a character and fighting against them. Fairly simple. Anyway, I just figured it would be fun to talk about my favorite games in this genre. There actually were a lot more that I came up with as I was making my list, but I'm going to talk about 10 today, and some of you've heard about, some you haven't, but let's get going. So my number 10 is, and again, it's not a bad game by any means. It's a game I give a high rating to, but it's the lowest on my list, and I'll kind of explain why. It's a great game. I haven't played it in a while, but this game is one that kind of came out of nowhere. I found it at Gen Con, and I wasn't even really sure what it was, but it had such adorable artwork. I just knew it was one I had to get involved with, and this game is Vagrant Song. So Vagrant Song is apparently... Oh, there we go. Vagrant Song, you play the role of a vagrant, and you're on this ghost train, and you're going to be playing through a scenario, and it's sort of this sort of ancient or old cartoon, sort of rubber tube arm cartoon with the, I guess, Cuphead style artwork. You're going to be one of these vagrants, and you're going to be in a scenario fighting a boss. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's like 20 scenarios, and the sort of core mechanism is pulling chits out of a bag and using them to do different actions. There's also dice rolling. You're going to be upgrading between scenarios because this is a campaign game. And honestly, it's the campaign nature that kind of hurts it a little bit for me because it's not one... The first scenario is one I've played a lot, and the later scenarios are more interesting, but you really can't just jump into one because you won't have the right equipment. You'll be underpowered. And although I thought the Off the Rails expansion was going to take it, well, off the rails, unfortunately, it did other things. It just made a more challenging mode and gave another campaign to play through. But once you get into it, if you're willing to commit to, a 20 scenario campaign, it's really interesting. The story is interesting. The characters are interesting. It does a lot with a very little. The board is always the same sort of 3 train cars, but there's going to be these terrain tokens, which are very simple, and then they're going to mean different things in each scenario, and you're fighting different bosses or bringing them their humanity in different ways. A lot of fun, really interesting, innovative game, one that I'm kind of itching to get played again. I just am dreading the campaign, but a great boss battler game, Vagrant Song. Let's go to number 9. You might notice a theme here. I guess I'm showing Vagrant Song. Let me pull that one down. As I tell you, the games that I like a lot, the ones that are campaigns tend to be a little lower on my list. The next one is a game that I have played a lot of. I've not finished the campaign though because it was a little too long. And I wanted to play it I wanted Victor to come and play it with me. And then we just got lost in other things. This game is Oathsworn, specifically Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. This is a great game where each scenario is really kind of 2 halves. There's sort of a storybook, choose your own adventure type scenario where you're moving around a map and doing, story elements. These little houses are unnecessary. And then eventually you are going to have a boss show up. And the rat is the most famous one. It's on the cover, so everyone knows about it. But there's a huge box of these bosses. And you are going to, this is a rat and some other horrible thing it looks like. And you have these characters and there's a card system where you're doing things and there's sort of this cooldown track and you can use cards to fight it and draw until you get certain bad levels, and then it wipes out your damage. Or you can roll dice, which is easier and faster, but also less controlled. There's a lot of different special abilities. You're always going to play with 4 characters, and that's another thing that dings this slightly because, if you're playing it solo, running 4 characters is a lot. There are sort of these half characters, these companion characters that are a little easier, lower maintenance, but also less fun. I wish there were a better solo way to play, but still, the game is fascinating. The bosses are fun. Each one is very different. And again, it does a lot with, well, not a little, because there's a big box, 2 big boxes full of minis, I think. But it does a lot component-wise other than that. It's just sort of always the same board and very simple terrain. And it can be really exciting, and I really had a lot of fun when I was in it. I really need to get this one back out and get back into it. It's a good game. The combat's fun. The bosses are fun. Everything about it's a lot of fun, except, again, you're in for a long haul if you open this box. That is my number 9, Oathsworn. Let's find out what my number 8 is. My number 8 is the first one that we're coming to that isn't really a campaign. And honestly, I think if I owned this game and could play it more, it might climb a little bit higher, because I actually really enjoy this game. This game is called Leviathan Wilds. Let me find it here. So Leviathan Wilds, you are climbing on these giant creatures. There's these Leviathans, I guess. And you are a climber, and there's a bunch of different characters, and they all do different things, but you're ultimately climbing. You have this book that I can't seem to find, where there's going to be some sort of a giant, and you're going to be climbing up it, and you're going to try and do damage to these certain break points, I guess. Can I find one? Well, here's an example of one, I guess. It's just part of it. And there's going to be these dice that are in these spots, and you're doing damage to them. You're going to see kind of what it's going to do. It's going to fight back, and you're trying to sort of balance your stamina, because if you run out of cards, you fall down, which isn't great. With all the other things that are going on, there's a big book full of different characters that you're fighting against. And so far, I mean, the few times I've played it, they've all been very different. Here's another example of a different one. There's taller ones, wider ones, different effects, and it's just it's much simpler than Oathsworn, for example, but it's a really fascinating game, and you can also play it just one-off scenarios, which is the best way to play. So I really enjoy it. I think if I got it from the most recent Kickstarter, but I missed the first one, so I haven't played it as much as I'd like to. But it's a great game, and I'm looking forward to more of it. That's my number 8, Leviathan Wilds. As for number 7, it is Marvel United. Marvel United, now, I could have gone with Marvel Champions as well. I thought about that, too. I don't know why my background's all black today. It doesn't much matter. Marvel United is the simpler of the two, but Marvel Champions delivers a similar experience, a different experience, but ultimately also good. But this one is a pure boss battler. You're going to set, and the game comes with, I mean, probably 100 different baddies you can fight against now. And it's a cooperative game, and it's dead simple. Ultimately, you're playing cards around this circle, and you're going to use the symbols of your card and the card before you. And all the heroes are kind of variations on the same theme, yet they have enough about them that's different to make them feel unique and kind of like you're doing something different. But where the game really shines is with the 100 or so villains. They're all different. They all have their own different ways that they win. Some have alternate victory conditions. Some are going to attack you. Some are going to mess with other things. Some are going to throw the normal paradigm out completely and just run around the board, and you're trying to stop them from making a loop. Whatever it happens to be, there's a lot of different things going on here. I love the variety. You can play this there's a couple of mini campaigns, but for the most part, it's just pick any one of the 100 or so villains, pick any one of the 300 or so heroes, find the minis, that takes longer than anything else, shuffle up the cards, and you're ready to go. It's a great game. It can be played with just about anyone, which makes it even better. And it's a game that I initially ranked kind of low, but as more stuff came out for it, I realized all the potential that's here. It's now my number 7 boss battler, Marvel United. Let's go to number 6. So my number 6 is kind of the game that got me thinking about this. The game I talked about on last week's Wednesday Whimsy, and we won't talk about it a lot here, but that game is Wraith and the Giants. I decided as I was making this that I currently like it more than Leviathan Wilds because I can play it. But it is most akin to Leviathan Wilds. Similar to that game, you are climbing all over these giants, and you are trying to take them out. And they'll have this row of cards, and the various weak points will activate at different points, and you're playing cards to 2 different rows and slowly building your own character up to make yourself stronger. But if if you burn out before you've killed the giant, well, then you lose. The game is super easy to set up. It's great solo. In fact, it's only a solo game. I recently got the new expansion, which adds a couple more wraiths and a new giant that's very difficult. It's just a really fun game, a great boss battler, and one of my go-to travel games these days, Wraith and the Giants. Let's find out what my number 5 is. My number 5 is a game that I've rarely won because of how some things about it. This is a game that is a boss battler, and ultimately one game is going to be playing 4 bosses. Now, honestly, I will admit that a few times I may have just kind of jumped to the 4th one, taken a little bit of gear, and just played the 4th scenario, because the 4th scenarios are the most interesting. But, if you're playing it properly, playing it straight, you're going to play one easy boss, one next level difficulty, one third level, and then sort of the final boss. And there's a bunch of bosses here. Oh, let me show the game. The game has, again, that kind of cute Cuphead-style artwork, and I'm a sucker for that. It's got really interesting characters. Everything's very unusual and quirky here. You've got some old king who part of his body is a dead mouth. You've got a fisherman who's depressed because he hates fishing. The game has standees, but it also has minis, and my minis are nicely painted by my friend Victor. Here's a set of unpainted minis. And it's just got all these different characters here. And ultimately, the actual gameplay is pretty simple. On your turn, you're going to move around a grid. You might attack. If you attack, you roll a die, and there's a target number, and you either hit or miss. When it's the bad guy's turn, you flip a card and do what it says, and each of these bad guys has its own story and its own sort of things that it's trying to do. And they're zany, a little bit irreverent. There's one that's a tourist, and he's just, there to enjoy himself, but he's accident prone, and so people think he's a bad guy. There's one in the expansion that recently came out that's kind of him again, but it's this guy wearing a kind of a costumed cat outfit, and as you beat him up, you're slowly ripping pieces of it off of him, and see that he's kind of chains and swords and knives and things underneath. There's the sheriff who's really looking for a wife and doesn't care who it is. There's a puppy with guns. There's just so many weird characters here. Rules-wise, the game's super light, and that makes it great for some groups and not great for others. It's very random, right? You can really win or lose by how lucky you are, but it's a lot of fun. And it's not long because I usually lose after 2 rounds, or you just play. This is when you really can set up and play just one scenario of one boss and have a great time. But however you do it, it's a lot of fun. I really like Townsfolk Tussle. I've heard that it is kind of a softer version of Kingdom Death Monster. I don't know. I don't really have experience with Kingdom Death Monster, but that's what I've heard. Anyway, let's go on to number 4. All right, my number 4 is the most played game on this list. It's probably my number 2 most played game of all time, or if you look at my board game stats app, my number 1. but that doesn't take into account some earlier games of another game. This game is Sentinels of the Multiverse. Sentinels of the Multiverse is a boss battler. That's real. I mean, it's actually one of the first ones that, it's probably the oldest one on this list. And it's a superhero boss battler game. What you are is you're going to take a team of at least 3 heroes, and you're going up against some big bad. So, for example, here we have Baron Blade. And you're trying to take down the big bad by playing cards. Each turn you're going to play a card, use a power, and then draw a card. And there's a whole lot of other aspects that'll come in too. There's also a different environment you'll play in, and there's enough content here to make sure you're never bored, because the game has expansions and expansions and expansions. And each of these characters has its own personality. They're fun, they're quirky. There's an interesting comic book world in which they live. This is a game that I just get so much out of. And I'm really looking forward to the new version. They're sort of re-releasing it with better artwork. Because some of the older artwork's a little rough. The newer stuff's pretty good. There's even the Oblivion scenario, which is a multi-hour big boss battler against some sort of a cosmic entity with essentially infinite life until you're able to kind of take it down. And it's this very cinematic experience that I really love. The problem with the game is it is so hard to run. There's so much to keep track of, so many effects of +1s or immune to damage, and a lot of different things. There's an app version that makes it much easier, but regardless of how you play it, it's just a fantastic game. And it really holds up. It's one that I'll go through a phase where I'll play 10, 15 games of it, and then I'll put it away for a while because, it's long and complicated to play. I often say that for this game, you really need a brain that's sitting in a jar on the table and connected to you to kind of keep track of everything, much like a game that's coming up. Anyway, it's a game I forgot to put it on here. Sentinels of the Multiverse, that's my number 4. Let's go on to number 3. All right, my number 3 is kind of a cheat because this is an expansion to a game. This is a game that I enjoyed in its base game, but when it came out with an expansion that made it into a boss battler, I enjoyed it immensely more. I mean, this repurposed the game for me. This game is Ash's Red Reigns. And it's not really cheating because it really is a different way to experience Ashes. What you are going to be doing is playing your standard Ashes Rise of the Phoenix-Born rules, but you're fighting against some sort of a big boss. You can play it either solo or 2-player, and actually both work really well. It's not kind of a pasted-on solo game, or 2-player game. You've got a simple dice mechanism where you're going to be rolling dice, and eventually it's going to get these symbols, and these symbols are going to cause it to level up and do better things, or worse things for you. And then, you're trying to take it down. You're trying to do a certain amount of damage. There's different difficulty levels you can do, and you can use any of the game's characters. This is a game, Ashes is a very complicated sort of head-to-head game where, there's so much backlog in it that a player who's played it a few times will just wipe the floor with a new player. In Red Reigns, that goes out the window because, of course, you don't have to worry about the other player's experience level because it's the game. Or if you're playing with somebody, it's cooperative. And so you can really let loose, experience all the characters. This game just breathes so much new life into Ashes, and it is the best way to play Ashes. I still enjoy it 2-player, but this is really the way to go. So that is my number 3, Ashes Red Reigns. Let's go on to number 2. Number 2, unfortunately, kind of feels like a cheat. Because most of the game you're not bottling a boss, but you kind of really are. It's really just a series of these skirmishes, and the boss version of it isn't that much different. It just has a different character. And this game is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones is... See, I say it's kind of a cheat, but ultimately what you think about in Too Many Bones is the bosses. So I guess it doesn't really feel like it, because these tyrants that you're fighting are ultimately what you're going for. So in Too Many Bones, you are a character. It's kind of some sort of an ugly looking creature called a gear lock, and you are you're sticking it to some great big bosses. And you're trying to go out within a certain number of days, reach the tyrant. Here's one tyrant. This is Nom. And you're trying to take him down. And what you're really doing is rolling lots and lots of dice. And each character has their own sort of custom skill tree. And throughout the course of the game, you'll be able to upgrade things. And you can either upgrade by getting a new die in a certain dice line, or you can upgrade your stats to give you more health, or the ability to move more and roll more dice, or more defense, whatever it happens to be. The actual game is kind of this tactical maneuvering puzzle-y game where it's a tactical combat puzzle, I guess, where you're moving around this board while these waves of bad guys come at you. You're rolling dice to try and kill them. If you're successful, you win. If not, you don't lose until the final fight, in which case you do. But the game's all about the customization of your characters and ultimately about making it to the big bad to take him down. So, it's not a campaign. Some games that are a campaign, this is one that definitely, you can play it as a campaign. There's an optional expansion where you can play the tyrants in a particular order and get small upgrades in between. But for the most part, this game is pick one baddie, one big bad, and go after him, and it's great. And all the characters are so different. Everything's unique and fun and fabulous and high-quality components. It's just a great game, one I really love, Too Many Bones. All right, let's go to number 1. And my number 1 really wasn't going to be a surprise. This is one that is a 10 out of 10 for me now. Some of these others were as well. I really like the boss battling genre. This game is Primal: The Awakening. In fact, right before came down here, I was showing my friend how to play it. I played against a boss I'd never fought before. Did not do so successfully, but still had a great time. What this game is it's pure monster fighting. You go against a bad guy. The bad guy is reacting to what you do, and you're just playing these sets of cards, trying to build the best combos, trying to make things that work together. There's fantastic figures. Mine have all been painted, although these are not mine. That hand looks like it's in paint. So you can see some of the different characters. Each of these bosses has its own unique flavor, its own unique things that it's doing. Each of the different heroes has its own flair, what they're going to be doing. This one's obviously an archer. There's one with a big shield. There's one with two swords, and she's kind of weaving in and out. There's just a lot going on here. I will say the game, it does not need this grid mat, but you just sort of pick one boss. Now, there is a campaign. I honestly found the campaign to be a structured way to build your deck. I didn't really find it to be that interesting. What is interesting is the fights. And the good thing, sort of the hook of the game, what this game does so well is it allows you to pick any monster and go at it at any level, 1, 2, 3, or there's nightmare versions, and 0, 1, 2, 3, or you can use your own. So you can go against any monster at any level, and it allows you to sort of bring your hero up to the level. And the deck building's pretty simple. You take your core cards, you pick one mastery and a couple of upgrades, and sort of a weapon and a potion and a helmet, and you're ready to go. There are pre-constructed decks also that are provided in case you don't want to figure it out by yourself. I've done both. Both are a lot of fun. I've played monsters at all levels. I find the level 3s might be a little bit sloppy, I guess is the way to turn, because you have to do so much damage to them, and they do so much damage back to you, and it just feels like we've got these two titans clashing. I'm not saying it's not fun. It's a lot of fun. You both kind of let loose on each other, but it kind of feels like the numbers are pretty big at that point. But a level 1 or level 2 is really where it's at. I love just taking a boss and seeing what it does. You've got this one here. I think this is the one. Yeah, this one really runs through the round counter, right? It's trying to end the game quickly. There's another one over here. It looks kind of like that. Yeah, this one here. is trying to, it's going to run away. And if it runs away, you lose. There's the one that gets harder, like it's skin hardened, so you do it less damage. There's, dragons of all types. There's water monsters. There's just so much going on. This is a game I never get tired of, which is unfortunate because it's huge and complicated, difficult to set up, and there's so much going on. It's Sentinels of the Multiverse level complexity, but I think I've got it down now so I can teach people and kind of help be that extra brain on the table. I really like this game. That's my number one, Primal the Awakening. And that is going to, that's going to do it for us. That will be the, just a moment. That's the end of my Boss Battler list, and it's going to be the end of this week's episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I'm going to, at this point, end things here. And so I will wish you, until next time, safe travels, courage when you need it, and I hope to see you back next Wednesday for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.